viewers and ASMR friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari. I'm an independent filmmaker and film enthusiast, and today we'll be talking about the movies. So the topic for today's video is Criterion Titles. The company is known for putting out the best movies, movies that had a cultural impact in some way. So if your film got onto the Criterion collection, it means that you did a good job. It means that you did something right. It means that you did a great film. It means that you had an impact on society in some way with your film, with your filmmaking. So I've selected 5 movies from the Criterion collection that I'd like to highlight and recommend to you. These are all great movies. You cannot go wrong with the Criterion collection. It's very rare that they miss. So without further ado, let's get into the films. Okay, so let's take a look at the first movie. The first movie is Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai by Jim Jarmusch. Let's read the back. Jim Jarmusch combined his love for the high-school crime dramas of Jean-Pierre Melville and Seijun Suzuki with the philosophical dimensions of samurai mythology for an eccentrically postmodern take on the hitman thriller. In one of his defining roles, Forrest Whitaker brings a commanding serenity to his portrayal of a Zen contract killer working for a bumbling mob outfit. A modern man who adheres steadfastly to the ideals of the Japanese warrior code, even as chaos and violence spiral around him. Featuring moody cinematography by the great Robbie Mueller, a sublime score by the Wu-Tang Clan's RZA, and a host of colorful character actors, including a memorably stone-faced Henry Silva, Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai plays like a pop culture sampling cinematic mixtape built around a one-of-a-kind tragic hero. Okay, so Ghost Dog is an incredible film by Jim Jarmusch. If you know Jim Jarmusch, you know that he's a very idiosyncratic filmmaker. His films are very unique and very original, and he's a one-of-a-kind filmmaker. His films are almost like their own genre because they're so offbeat and so original. Ghost Dog is a hitman film that came out in the year 1999. 99 was a legendary year in film. I'm actually going to do an entire video on the year 1999 at some point. There were so many movies that came out in 1999 that were incredible, whether it be Eyes Wide Shut or The Matrix or Three Kings or Magnolia or Bringing Out the Dead. Ghost Dog came out in that year of 1999, but unlike those films, it kind of was under the radar. It didn't have a big splash when it came out, which is unfortunate because the film is one of the best films from that year and one of the best films on the Criterion collection. This is, I think, Jim Jarmusch's masterpiece, and that's saying a lot because his movies like Down by Law and Mystery Train and so many others are incredible. But this is my favorite Jarmusch film. It has got an incredible performance by Forrest Whitaker, who does everything with body language. I love when actors say a lot and express themselves with body language instead of dialogue. And this film is minimal with its dialogue, but Forrest Whitaker is incredible as this hitman. It's a hitman film. His performance is interesting because it's both hard-edged and soft at the same time. There's a soft presence to him. At the same time, he's this cold-blooded contract killer who's a badass, basically. But it really mixes together styles in a really interesting, unique way. The film is very slow-paced and deliberate, but it works for the movie. It's a slow burn, but it's a great slow burn. The film is both funny and shocking at the same time. One of my favorite things about this movie are the friendships that develop over the course of the film. He has a friendship with the ice cream man who speaks French. They don't understand each other at all, but it's great. Like, their relationship says everything you need to know about how they feel about each other without the characters understanding a single thing that they're saying. There's a great scene where they're playing chess, or there's a great scene where they watch a guy in the neighborhood build a boat in his yard, and it's just very tender and it's very interesting, and it says everything you need to know about the relationship with only a few words. This is a hip-hop film. The soundtrack by the RZA, the hip-hop soundtrack by the RZA is excellent. It's like a hip-hop hitman film, which, if it sounds interesting, it sounds good. It is. It's because it's great. The soundtrack moves the film. There are sequences in the film where Ghost Dog, played by Forrest Whitaker, is just driving and listening to music, and it's very absorbing and it's very fascinating, even though there's not really much going on. That's the Jarmusch way, and he can make very sort of mundane, even boring situations seem really entertaining and engrossing. That's a gift that Jarmusch has, and it's on full display in Ghost Dog. Ghost Dog is one of the best films of the 90s, one of the best films of 1999, and one of the best films on the Criterion collection. I cannot recommend recommend this film enough. You will love this film. Ghost Dog is excellent. Highly recommended. Check it out. Ghost Dog. Okay, so moving on to the next film. The Thin Red Line by director Terrence Malick. Now we're talking about one of my 5 favorite movies of all time. Let's read the back. After directing 2 of the most extraordinary movies of the 1970s, Badlands and Days of Heaven, American artist Terrence Malick disappeared from the film world for 20 years, only to resurface in 1998 with this visionary adaptation of James Jones's 1962 novel about the World War II battle for Guadalcanal. A big-budget, spectacularly mounted epic, The Thin Red Line is also one of the most deeply philosophical films ever released by a major Hollywood studio, a thought-provoking meditation on man, nature, and violence. Featuring a cast of contemporary cinema's finest actors, Sean Penn, Nick Nolte, Elias Koteas, and Woody Harrelson among them. The Thin Red Line is a kaleidoscopic evocation of the experience of combat that ranks as one of the greatest war films ever produced. That's a good summary of The Thin Red Line. This is a film that is about the horrors of war and the horrors of violence and the toll that violence takes over the course of a mission that the American soldiers are doing to take a hill from the Japanese. But there are no good guys and bad guys in this film. It's not that type of movie. It's a very objective look at war and a very horrific look at war. It's an anti-war film. And this film was sort of overshadowed when it came out in 1998 by Saving Private Ryan, which is a masterwork in its own right. But that film took all the attention away in 1998 as far as war films were concerned, which is too bad because The Thin Red Line is a masterwork. This is one of the finest films of all time. I can't stress it enough. This is one of the finest movies ever made. Again, like I said before, it's one of my favorite movies ever. It's in my top 5 of all time. This is a film that is extremely powerful. It asks the question of what is war in the heart of nature? What is this thing that we're doing to each other that's so horrific? What kind of man are you? What kind of person are you to take part in something that is so brutal and horrific and sad and tragic? Is there a point to war? Is there a greater meaning to the situation at hand? Like all of Terrence Malick's movies, this is extremely poetic and graceful with its cinematography and imagery. You can't forget the images in this film. It's done with so much grace and power. Mesmerizing imagery, beautiful shots. It's interesting because the film is so beautiful, yet it's so violent and horrific at the same time. But Terrence Malick is a poet with the camera. He really is a poet. That's the best way to describe him as a filmmaker. He's a poet with the camera. You can't talk about Thin Red Line without talking about the score by Hans Zimmer. The score is an epic symphony. It is extraordinary, and it builds so impactfully over the course of the movie. There's a track in the film called Journey to the Line, which is one of the most iconic pieces of music in film history, and the scene that it takes place in is one of the most powerful, gripping sequences of war combat that you'll ever see in a film. This film has an ensemble cast, as already previously mentioned. The soul of the movie is Elias Koteas, who is incredible in the film, and the heart of the film is Jim Caviezel, who's also extraordinary in the film. You follow these 2 characters for the most part, even though there's a lot of other characters, Nick Nolte, etc. George Clooney pops up at the end. Adrian Brody is in it. Sean Penn is excellent in this film as well. But it's really Jim Caviezel and Elias Koteas' movie, and they are tremendous. They are absolutely tremendous. The Thin Red Line is atmospheric, it's powerful, it's gripping. It is an extraordinary work of art. I can't say enough good things about The Thin Red Line. This film is as good as movies get. Terrence Malick is at the height of his powers with this film. This is one of the great filmmakers of all time doing his best work. You should absolutely watch this. It's the best war film since Apocalypse Now, if not even better than Apocalypse Now. What can I say? The Thin Red Line, it's on the Criterion Collection for a reason. Go check it out. You will not be disappointed. This is one of the best films of all time, The Thin Red Line. Okay, the next film on the list is a fun one. Bound by the Wachowskis, the debut of the 1990s. Let's read the back of the Blu-ray. Before they blew the world's minds with The Matrix, Lon and Lily Wachowski delivered a jolt of pure pop pleasure with their hyper-stylish debut, which puts a deliciously sapphic spin on a crackerjack caper premise. When Butch Plummer Corky, played by Gina Gershon, catches the eye of a fatale Violet, Jennifer Tilly. Little does she know what she's about to be drawn into both. Little does she know she's about to be drawn into both a torrid affair and a high-stakes heist that will pit the pair against the mob. With crackling dialogue, luscious neo-noir cinematography, and live-wire performances by Gershon Tilly and Joe Pantoliano, Bound is a genre reimagining joyride that keeps both the tension and the erotic heat rising through each crazily careening twist. This is a lesbian neo-noir by the Wachowskis, the debut of the 1990s. The 90s had incredible debuts by directors like Quentin Tarantino, David Fincher, Sofia Coppola, Wes Anderson, David O. Russell. So many great directors had their debuts in the 90s, but this is my favorite debut of the 90s, Bound by the Wachowskis. This is a really entertaining movie. It's a fun ride. Basically, that's what it is. It's a fun ride. The film starts as an erotic romance where two characters are falling for each other, and then it morphs into this crazy crime thriller with a series of twists and turns that are extremely entertaining. I love how the Wachowskis just throw a series of obstacles at the characters. One thing goes wrong, and then another thing goes wrong, and then another thing goes wrong, and then another thing goes wrong. And it's just really fun to see how the characters try to survive the situations that happen. The performances in this film are excellent. Gina Gershon is so cool. Jennifer Tilly is amazing. Joe Pantoliano steals the movie. He is so funny and so funny and so fun and so cool. And his performance is over the top, but it's brilliant. Joe Pantoliano is an excellent actor. He's also in The Matrix by the Wachowskis. He plays Cypher in The Matrix. He steals the movie because it really becomes his film once the movie morphs into a crime thriller. So the film is literally about coming out of the closet. There's a scene where Gina Gershon literally busts out of a closet, and you can't get more symbolic than that. It's about finding your true self and becoming your true self, and it's done in a way that is extremely entertaining. It is as entertaining a movie as you're going to find on the Criterion Collection. It's a genre film. It's a brilliant genre film. Bound by the Wachowskis. I highly recommend this film. If you want like a fun time with your friends, if you want a movie that's going to be a fun time with your friends, look no further than Bound. The cinematography is excellent. It's a noir. It is a thriller. It is sensual and sexy. It is amazing. Bound by the Wachowskis, the debut of the 1990s. Check it out, Bound. Okay, so the next movie on the list, we're delving into horror. Cure by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Let's read the back. Kiyoshi Kurosawa's arresting international breakthrough established him as one of the leaders of an emerging new wave of Japanese horror, while pushing the genre into uncharted realms of philosophical and existential exploration. A string of shocking, seemingly unmotivated murders, each committed by a different person yet all bearing the same grisly hallmarks, leads Detective Takabe, played by Koji Yakusho, into a labyrinthine investigation to discover what connects them, and into a disturbing game of cat and mouse with an enigmatic amnesiac, Masato Hagawara, who may be evil incarnate. Awash in hypnotic dread, Cure is a tour de force of psychological tension and hallucinatory journey into the darkest recesses of the human mind. This is a very scary and unnerving film. I'm not the biggest fan of the horror genre, but when a horror movie is great, it's great, and Cure is one of the best horror films of all time, if not the best horror film of all time. It is actually more of a psychological thriller than a horror film. Maybe that's why I like it so much. This film is all about evil, and it has an evil presence lurking around, this evil presence that's in the film that is mesmerizing, literally mesmerizing. I don't want to say too much about the plot of Cure because the joy of this movie is letting the film unravel and seeing all the twists and turns without knowing what happens. So I don't actually want to say too much about Cure because I don't want to spoil it and ruin it for you. But this film is extremely unsettling and unnerving. It just has this ominous feeling and this ominous dread that builds over the course of the picture. And it leads you into unexpected territory. You really don't know what's going on. The film is very understated and subtle and quiet and deliberate. It is a slow-moving film. It's a slow burn. So if you don't like slow burn horror movies, maybe you might get bored with it. But if you like slow burn horror films, this film is really, really tense and very, very, very scary. The pacing of the film, like I said, is not for everyone. It is very deliberate, it is very slow, but you gradually get absorbed by the film. You gradually get absorbed by the film. You gradually get engrossed by what's happening because there are so many weird situations that unfold. And it's not too gory of a movie. I don't like horror movies that are all about torture and gore and disgusting stuff. This film is more atmospheric than gory, and I like that. I mean, there are some brutal images in the film. There are some bloody, violent scenes, but for the most part, it's not like over the top. It's not in your face. It's not exaggerated, and it's not like intensely violent or so violent that it turns you off from the movie. I like that a lot about this film. Again, I don't want to say too much about Cure because the fun of this movie is not knowing what's going on and just letting it unfold. But I can say that Cure is one of the best movies of the 90s. It came out in 1997. It's one of the best movies of the 90s. It's one of the best horror films of the 90s. It's Kiyoshi Kurosawa's masterpiece, and I hope you watch it, Cure. I think you can actually watch it on the Criterion channel, so go check it out for sure, Cure. Okay, so the final choice for today. Punch Drunk Love by Paul Thomas Anderson from 2002. Let's read the back. Chaos lurks in every corner of this giddily off-kilter foray into romantic comedy by Paul Thomas Anderson. Struggling to cope with his erratic temper, novelty toilet plunger salesman Barry Egan, Adam Sandler, demonstrating remarkable versatility in his first dramatic role, spends his days collecting frequent flyer coupons and dodging the insults of his 7 sisters. The promise of a new life emerges when Barry inadvertently attracts the affection of a mysterious woman named Lena, Emily Watson, but their budding relationship is threatened when he falls prey to the swindling operator of a phone sex line and her deranged boss, played with maniacal brio by Philip Seymour Hoffman. Fueled by the careening momentum of a Baroque futurist score by John Bryan, the Cannes award-winning Punch Drunk Love channels the spirit of classic Hollywood and the whimsy of Jacques Tati into an idiosyncratic ode to the delirium of new romance. Okay, so when I say this movie is offbeat, I really mean this movie is offbeat. It is a really strange film by Paul Thomas Anderson. It's a follow-up to Magnolia. Magnolia was this 3-hour masterpiece that came out in 1999, and he wanted to follow it up with a 90-minute film. This was his 90-minute follow-up, and I would actually say this is arguably Paul Thomas Anderson's best work. I know people are all about There Will Be Blood, which is a masterwork and one of the great movies of all time, but I actually think Punch Drunk Love is Paul Thomas Anderson's best film. It is the most offbeat, off-kilter. Everything that they say on the back of the Blu-ray is correct. It is really offbeat, it's really strange and unique, but it is extraordinarily entertaining, and it is very moving and powerful in its own unique way. The film is a quirky comedy that's about an offbeat introvert. Adam Sandler plays the introvert. It's Adam Sandler's best role. It's his best performance. He's both funny and tragic and sad in the film. He's a nice man with boiling anger issues, and there's a scene in this film where he smashes his bathroom to pieces that perfectly conveys that tragic and funny nature of the character. His chemistry with Emily Watson is absolutely incredible. It's very romantic and weird. It is a romance, but it's a very weird romance. But the film works on you gradually. You can't talk about Punch Drunk Love without talking about the score by John Bryan. It's a very uncomfortable, propulsive score that makes you feel unsettled in your skin, much like Adam Sandler's character is uncomfortable in his skin. The score makes you feel that because it is so propulsive and noisy and chaotic. There are so many great scenes in Punch Drunk Love. The supporting role by Philip Seymour Hoffman is hilarious. It's one of my favorite Philip Seymour Hoffman roles. He's so funny in this film. He's intense, but he's really, really funny. And it's one of his great performances. It's just a supporting role, but he makes the most of it. Emily Watson is amazing. The film is one of the great movies of the 2000s. I think you're gonna love this film. Again, this is a movie to watch with a bunch of friends. It's so strange. It's so unusual. It's a very original romantic comedy. It's got Paul Thomas Anderson's spin. I would actually say this is when Paul Thomas Anderson really became a complete original. His earlier movies like Boogie Nights and Magnolia really lean on his influences of Robert Altman and Martin Scorsese, but with Punch Drunk Love he really becomes his own filmmaker, and this started his streak of being very original with movies that he followed up with like There Will Be Blood and Inherent Vice, Licorice Pizza. He really became himself with this film to me, and I can't recommend it enough. Punch Drunk Love is one of the great films of the 2000s. You're not going to be disappointed. Watch it with a bunch of friends. Punch Drunk Love on the Criterion Collection. I'm so glad this film is on the Criterion Collection because I think it is Paul Thomas Anderson's masterwork, and you're going to enjoy this film a lot. Punch Drunk Love. Okay, those were the Criterion titles I'd like to highlight for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.